Session 2 is called Living in Our Heads, and it starts off again with the body scan. So before we talk about how the week went, we start off with the body scan again, and we talk about how the body scan was. And then we talk about how did the week go. And very often people will talk about how they were falling asleep or the conditions weren't right, they weren't doing it correctly, their mind was wandering, they couldn't, it was difficult for them to remember to do it. Strong emotions came up. These are very normal obstacles, and so we want to proactively talk about them. And even if they didn't do it at all, instead of making them feel guilty about it, you just kind of encourage them. Well, like anything else in life, all we can do is decide now if you want to continue to do the practices. Then the subject, and by the way, the very broad generalization, but most MBCT sessions start off with a mindfulness exercise, talk about that exercise, process it with mindful inquiry, talk about how the week went, and then there's some topic that we work on, and maybe another exercise, maybe not, and then a homework assignment. That's a typical MBCT session. So the topic for session 2 is this connection between thoughts and feelings. And all of you who know CBT, this is an easy one. We just do the ABC model. A is activating event, the situation. B is belief or thoughts about that situation. And then C is consequence or what follows. Typically emotions are what we talk about here. And you can use your own stories, your own examples. The one in the protocol manual is the walking down the street exercise, where you imagine you're walking down the street and you look across the street and you see somebody you know. So you smile and wave, and they just don't seem to notice you and walk right past you. What are some thoughts that might pop up in somebody's head in that situation? And John said, oh, they really hate me too, or maybe they found out about me going to the hospital and they don't want to talk to me. And so we talked about this connection, right? So A, the activating event is walking down the street and seeing somebody you know, and they ignore you. Here, the belief is there's something wrong with me. So as a consequence, you're going to feel even more depressed. Now, what if your thought was, oh, they forgot their glasses today and they didn't notice it was me? Or, wow, they're so caught up in their own mind they didn't notice it was me. Then your feeling may be, oh, I hope they're okay, or maybe they're distracted, or it's kind of funny that they forgot their glasses. So here we're making the point that thought affects the feelings. We also make the point that the feelings affect the thoughts, right? Mood state dependent learning and memory. Because John was still struggling with some of the depression, it was lifting, but there was still some there. Because he was struggling with some of that depression, he was more likely to think negative thoughts. Right? If he'd have been in a great mood and the same thing happened, he'd be more likely to think, oh, well, maybe something's wrong with them, or, I hope they're okay, because he would be in a different mood state and that would affect the way he thinks. Now, at this point, we're not getting into fixing it or changing it or fighting it. We're just having them see the connections between the thoughts and the feelings. And one of the homework assignments, and we talk about it now in the session, is called the Pleasant Events Calendar, and it looks pretty much like a CBT thought record, a little bit different, but we asked them just to pay attention to one pleasant event per day and just break down and write down what happened, what thoughts were in their mind, how were they feeling emotionally, were there any sensations going on in their body, and what are you thinking right now as you're filling this out? So again, different than a CBT thought record, we're not going to try to make better thoughts or different thoughts. We're just going to practice noticing these things and breaking apart thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. The next exercise is a mindful breathing exercise. And here we're not necessarily trying to use it to relax or force deep breathing. It's just to pay attention to breathing. Mind wanders off, you bring it back. Mind wanders off, you bring it back. Now, naturally, the breath will slow down, but you can't really force it to happen. For most people, that adds more struggle. The other interesting thing about the breath is that it's both conscious and unconscious. right? So you control the breath, and yet it happens by itself. And that's the same thing that happens with your thoughts. They happen by themselves, and yet you can think certain things on purpose. So it helps us let go of that struggle between these things we can control and that we can't control. So the home practice for session 2 then is to do this body scan again once a day. Pay attention to the breath, do that mindful breathing exercise for a few minutes each day. Do that pleasant events calendar we just talked about. And if they were doing the same routine activity like brushing their teeth the previous week, just pick a different thing like showering or taking out the trash.